The war room was full of aliens. They came from 12 different worlds, and they all looked different. Some had blue skin and 4 arms. Some looked like insects, with hard shells. Some were like snakes that could stand up straight. They had come together to fight a common enemy. And today, they were meeting on the biggest ship in their fleet. Commander Daniel Harris stood in the corner of the room. He was the only human there, except for one other officer. At 42 years old, Daniel had been fighting in this war for 15 years. His face had scars from old battles. His left arm was made of metal because he had lost the real one in combat. He was tired, but he was still standing. The alien general was named Kethral. He was a Valorian, one of the blue-skinned species, with 4 arms. His people believed they were the smartest beings in the galaxy. They looked down on anyone who did not think the way they did. Before we talk about the war, Kethral said, we should learn about our human allies. We know very little about their culture. A screen lit up in the middle of the room. It showed old paintings from Earth. There were Greek soldiers fighting against huge armies. There were gods with hammers and swords. There were knights fighting dragons and monsters. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He knew what was coming. These are human myths, Kethral explained to the room. Stories they told each other for thousands of years. An insect-like alien named Drethenix clicked his mouthparts together. It was the sound his species made when they were amused. They believed these things were real? 1. It seems so, Kethral said. 300 soldiers, holding back an army of 1 million. Men dying and coming back to life. Gods, walking on their planet. Laughter spread through the room. The aliens looked at each other and shook their heads. Even the snake-like Thesari made a hissing sound that meant they thought it was funny. Lieutenant Commander Amy Patterson stood next to Daniel. She was 31 years old, with smart eyes and a quick mind. She was good at planning battles, and everyone respected her skills. But right now, her face was red, with anger. Your ancestors were clearly very simple, Drethenix said. No wonder your species took so long to reach the stars. We stopped believing in such nonsense thousands of years ago. Another alien added. Perhaps this is why humans are still so emotional and unpredictable. Amy took a step forward. Now wait just a minute. Daniel put his hand on her shoulder. Let them laugh, he said quietly. They do not understand. But Kethral had good hearing. Understand what? Commander Harris? Please, explain to us what we are missing. Daniel looked at the alien general. His eyes were calm, but there was something hard underneath. The myths are not just stories. They are blueprints. Blueprints? Kethral raised what passed for an eyebrow on his face. Blueprints? For what? Before Daniel could answer, alarms started screaming. Red lights flashed everywhere. The room went from calm to chaos in seconds. Enemy fleet detected, a computer voice announced. 47 capital ships. The Vorex Dominion has found us. The laughter stopped immediately. Every alien in the room went silent. The Vorex were the enemy they had been fighting for 10 years. They were brutal and cruel. They did not take prisoners. They did not show mercy. And now 47 of their biggest ships were heading straight for them. Kethral moved to the main display. His 4 hands flew across the controls, pulling up information. What he saw made his blue face go pale. We only have 19 ships, he said. They outnumber us more than 2 to 1. Can we run? One of the Thesari asked. They are between us and the nearest escape route. We cannot reach hyperspace before they catch us. Unhearted pard, ender-hearted. The room fell into despair. Aliens who had been laughing moments ago now looked terrified. The Valorians, who always talked about logic and reason, were frozen with fear. The Calvari insects were clicking their mouths nervously. Daniel watched them all. These were supposed to be the leaders of the coalition. These were the beings who thought humans were primitive and foolish. And now, facing real danger, they did not know what to do. "We should surrender," Drethnik said. "Perhaps they will be merciful." "The Voreks do not know the meaning of mercy," Amy said. "They will kill everyone on these ships. Every single one of us." "Then what do you suggest?" Kethral snapped. "You heard the numbers. 47 against 19. The mathematics are clear. We cannot win this battle." Daniel stepped forward. All eyes turned to him. "You are right," he said. "By your mathematics, we cannot win. But humans do not fight by mathematics." "Then how do you fight?" Kethral demanded. Daniel looked at the screen where the human myths were still displayed. Greek soldiers at Thermopylae. Viking warriors in their final battles. Knights who rode out to face dragons, knowing they might die. "We fight with something you do not understand," Daniel said. "We fight with stories." "Stories?" Drethniks made a sound of disbelief. "Stories will not stop plasma cannons." "No. But they will make us stand when standing seems impossible. They will make us fight when fighting seems pointless. They will make us sacrifice everything when sacrifice seems foolish." He pointed at the image of the 300 Spartans. Those warriors knew they were going to die. Every single one of them knew it. But they fought anyway, because their sacrifice would save others. Their story has been told for thousands of years. It has inspired millions of humans to do the same thing. Kethral stared at him. "You are suggesting we all die gloriously? That is not a strategy. That is stupidity." "No," Daniel said. "I am suggesting something else." The war room had become a place of fear. Alien officers ran back and forth, checking screens and shouting orders. But nothing they did could change the truth. The enemy was coming, and there was no way to stop them. General Kethral stood at the main display, his 4 arms hanging at his sides. He had led armies for over 100 years. He had won battles that seemed impossible. But this was different. This was mathematics, and mathematics did not lie. "There must be something we can do," one of his officers said. "There is nothing," Kethral replied. "We have 19 ships. They have 47. Even if we fight perfectly, we will lose." Daniel Harris walked to the display. His metal arm made a soft humming sound as he touched the controls. The screen changed, showing a map of the space around them. "What is this?" Kethral asked. "A chance," Daniel said. He pointed at a strange, glowing area on the map. "This is an anomaly. A tear in space. Ships can pass through it to escape. That anomaly is unstable," a Thessari scientist hissed. His snake-like body coiled tighter as he spoke. "Any ship that enters might be destroyed completely." "Might be," Daniel said. "Not will be. The risk is too high," Kethral said. "We could lose the entire fleet. If we stay here, we will lose the entire fleet anyway. At least this way. Some ships might survive." Amy Patterson stepped closer to the display. Her tactical mind was already working, looking for solutions. "Even if we try for the anomaly, the Voreks will chase us. Their ships are faster. They will catch us before we get there." "Yes," Daniel said. "Unless someone slows them down." The room went quiet. Everyone understood what he was saying, but no one wanted to believe it. "You are suggesting a rearguard action," Kethral said slowly. "Someone stays behind to fight while the rest escape." "Not someone. Me." Amy grabbed his arm. "Daniel! That is suicide. 1 ship against 47? You would not last 5 minutes." "I do not need to last long. I just need to last long enough for the fleet to reach the anomaly. If I can hold them for 18 minutes, the fleet will make it." "And then what?" Amy demanded. "You die alone out there while we run away?" "Yes." The word hung in the air like a weight. Daniel said it so simply, like he was talking about the weather, like dying was just another task to complete. Drethnix made a confused clicking sound. This makes no sense. Why would you throw away your life? You could escape with the rest of us. Why choose certain death? Daniel turned to face the insect alien. Do you remember the story you laughed at? 300 Spartans against 1,000,000 enemies? A ridiculous myth. Those 300 men knew they would die. But they also knew that their deaths would save their country. They stood in a narrow pass and held back the enemy long enough for their people to prepare. Every single one of them died. But their sacrifice changed history. He looked around the room at all the alien faces. That story is not just a fairy tale. It is a lesson. It teaches humans that sometimes, one person's death can save many lives. It teaches us that sacrifice has meaning, that dying for others is the greatest thing we can do. Kethral studied the human with new eyes. You truly believe this? You believe your death will matter? I know it will. Because you will tell the story. You will tell others that a human held back an army. You will tell them that we do not surrender. We do not give up. We do not let our friends die if we can stop it. And this story will help win the war? Stories always help win wars. They give people hope. They give people courage. They make people believe they can do the impossible. Amy was crying now, tears running down her face. There has to be another way. Let me think. Give me time to find another solution. There is no time, Amy. The Vorex will be here in less than an hour. Daniel took her hands in his. One, warm and real. One, cold and metal. You are the best tactical mind I have ever known. The Coalition needs you. Earth needs you. You have to survive. But I need you, she whispered. No. You need to remember me. And you need to tell my story. He let go of her hands and turned to Kethral. General, I need you to give the order. Tell the fleet to run for the anomaly. I will cover your escape. I will cover your escape. I will cover. Kethral was silent for a long moment. His forearms were folded across his chest, and his blue face was impossible to read. Finally, he spoke. Commander Harris, I have commanded armies for over a century. I have studied the tactics of 40 species. Never in all that time have I seen a soldier volunteer to die when escape was possible. Then you have never truly known humans. No, I am beginning to think I have not. Kethral unfolded his arms and extended one hand toward Daniel. It was a gesture of deep respect among his people. I called your myths the dreams of primitives. I see now that I was wrong. They are not dreams. They are promises. Daniel took the offered hand. Promises that when darkness comes, someone will stand against it. Yes. And you are choosing to keep that promise. Today. Someone has to. The two warriors stood there for a moment, human and alien, understanding each other for the first time. Then, Kethral pulled back his hand and turned to his officers. Send the order to all ships. We make for the anomaly at maximum speed. The human vessel, Defiance, will cover our retreat. The officers hesitated, looking at each other. Do it now, Kethral shouted. Every second we waste is a second this man does not have. The officers scrambled to obey. All across the fleet, ships began turning toward the anomaly. Engines powered up. Crews prepared for the desperate run. Daniel walked toward the door of the war room. His steps were steady, his face calm. He looked like a man going to work, not a man going to die. Daniel, Amy called out. He stopped but did not turn around. Why? She asked. Why does it have to be you? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Because I understand the stories. Because the hangar bay was loud with the sounds of ships preparing to leave. Engines roared. Crews shouted orders. Metal clanged against metal as weapons were loaded and repairs were rushed. Everyone knew they had very little time. Daniel Harris walked through the chaos toward his ship. The Defiance was not the biggest vessel in the fleet, but she was tough. She had been through more battles than most ships survived. Her hull was scarred and patched in many places. She was ugly, but she was strong. Just like him, Daniel thought. He had named her himself. 5 years ago, when she was assigned to him, Defiance. The word meant refusing to give up, refusing to bow down, refusing to accept defeat, even when it seemed certain. It was a very human name for a ship. Now she would live up to that name one last time. His crew was already there, waiting by the loading ramp. 23 men and women who had served with him for years. They knew him, they trusted him, and they knew something was wrong. Chief Engineer Patricia Cole stepped forward. She was a small woman with gray hair and hands that were always covered in grease. She had kept the Defiance running through battles that should have destroyed her. "Commander, we heard the orders. The fleet is running. What about us?" Daniel looked at his crew. These were good people. Brave people. They had followed him into danger many times. But this was different. "The fleet needs cover," he said. "Someone has to stay behind and slow down the Vorex. We can do that," Patricia said. "We have the weapons. We have the courage. I know you do. But this mission is different. This mission is one way only." Note. The crew looked at each other. They understood what he was saying. Stay behind meant die. Hold off the enemy meant be destroyed. This was not a battle they could win. This was a sacrifice. "Then we will do it together," Patricia said firmly. "We are your crew. We do not leave you." Daniel shook his head. "No. You will transfer to other ships. All of you. Commander. That is an order." His voice was hard now, commanding. "I am not asking you to die for me. I am telling you to live, to survive, to help win this war." A young officer named Billy Turner spoke up. He was only 25, the youngest on the crew. "Sir, we signed up to fight. We knew the risks. You signed up to fight in battles that had meaning. This battle has meaning only if the fleet survives. The more people on those ships, the better chance they have. Your skills, your experience, those things matter. They will help save lives." "And what about you?" Patricia asked quietly. "Someone has to fly the Defiance. Someone has to aim the weapons and keep the engines running long enough to do what needs to be done. I can do that alone. The ship has automatic systems. She will fight even when I cannot." "It is not fair," Billy said. His voice was thick with emotion. "No, it is not fair. War is never fair." Daniel put his hand on the young man's shoulder. "But sometimes, one person can make a difference. Sometimes, one sacrifice can save thousands. This is one of those times." Patricia stepped closer. There were tears in her eyes, something Daniel had never seen before. She was the toughest person he knew. "You have been a good captain," she said. "The best I ever served under. Du three sender. The vansing when you not confound, and you have been the best engineer. The Defiance would have fallen apart years ago without you." He looked at all of them. "Go now. Get to your assigned ships. Do not look back." One by one, the crew saluted him. Some were crying. Some were angry. But they all obeyed. They gathered their personal belongings and walked toward other vessels. Billy Turner was the last to leave. He stopped at the edge of the ramp and turned back. "Sir, the stories we grew up with, the heroes who gave their lives. Did you ever think you would become one of them?" Daniel smiled sadly. "Every human child dreams of being a hero. Most of us never get the chance. I guess I am one of the lucky ones. I do not think luck is the right word. Maybe not. But it is the word I am going to use." Billy nodded and left. Daniel watched him go until he disappeared into the crowd. Then another figure appeared, walking against the flow of people. Amy Patterson. Her face was set in determination, but her eyes were red from crying. "I knew you would come," Daniel said. "I had to see you one more time." She climbed the ramp and stood facing him. I keep trying to think of something to say, something that will change your mind. But I cannot find the words, because there are no words. We both know what has to happen. I know. I hate it, but I know. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph. It was worn and faded, showing a young boy standing next to an elderly man in military uniform. My grandfather, he said, handing her the picture. He was at Iwo Jima, one of the bloodiest battles in human history. He watched his friends die around him. He carried their bodies off the field. Amy looked at the photograph. The old man had kind eyes but a hard face, like someone who had seen too much. He used to tell me stories when I was a boy. Stories about Achilles, who chose a short life of glory over a long life of being forgotten. Stories about Beowulf, who killed the dragon but died in the process. Stories about men who threw themselves on grenades to save their friends. Why did he tell you those stories? Because he wanted me to understand something. Something important. Daniel took a deep breath. Humans do not fight because we think we can win. We fight because some things are worth fighting for, even if we lose. We die for each other, because that is what makes us human. Amy clutched the photograph to her chest. And now you are going to become one of those stories, if I am lucky. He gently touched her face. You have to tell them. Amy, tell the aliens. Tell the coalition. Tell Earth. Tell them that humans do not surrender. Tell them that we keep our promises. Tell them that when one of us falls, another will rise. I will tell them, I promise. Good. He stepped back and straightened his uniform. Now go. The fleet needs to leave soon, and I need to get the Defiance ready. Amy did not move. I am scared, she admitted. Do not be scared, I am not. It was a lie, but it was a good lie. The kind of lie that helps people keep going. I know exactly what I am doing. I know why I am doing it. And I know it matters. She nodded slowly, then turned to leave. At the top of the ramp, she stopped. Daniel, I will not forget. Not ever. I know you will not. That is why I chose to tell you. She walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Daniel watched her go, then turned and entered his ship. The Defiance broke away from the fleet and turned toward the enemy. Behind her, 19 coalition ships began their desperate run toward the anomaly. Their engines burned bright against the darkness of space. Daniel sat alone on the bridge. The chair felt bigger now, emptier. He had spent years surrounded by his crew, their voices filling the ship with life. Now there was only silence and the soft hum of machines. Computer, status report. All weapon systems online, shields at maximum, engine power at 100%. Good. He looked at the tactical display. The Vorex fleet was a wall of red dots, moving closer every second. 47 ships, destroyers, cruisers, and one massive dreadnought at the center. Enough firepower to crack a planet. And facing them, one small human ship. Daniel opened a communication channel. Coalition Fleet. This is Commander Daniel Harris aboard the Defiance. I am beginning my attack run. You have approximately 18 minutes to reach the anomaly. Use them well. Kethral's voice came back through the speakers. Commander Harris, the Coalition will not forget what you are doing today. You have my word. Just get those ships to safety. That is all the thanks I need. He closed the channel and turned his attention to the enemy. They were close enough now that he could see individual ships on the display. Each one was larger than the Defiance. Each one had more weapons, more shields, more everything. But they did not have what he had. They did not have a reason to die. Daniel opened a new channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. He wanted the Vorex to hear this. Vorex Dominion. This is Commander Daniel Harris of the United Earth Navy. You have conquered worlds through fear and numbers. You have never met an enemy who was not afraid to die. Let me show you what that means. He pushed the throttle forward. The Defiance surged ahead, racing straight toward the enemy fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. The Vorex ships held their positions, confused. Their tactical programs had no instructions for dealing with a single ship charging an entire armada. It did not make sense. It was not logical. But humans had never been logical. Daniel fired everything at once. Missiles launched from tubes on both sides of the ship. Railguns sent streams of metal slugs tearing through space. Energy beams carved bright lines toward the enemy. The first Vorex destroyer exploded before its crew even knew what was happening. The ship's shields were up, but they were pointing the wrong direction. No one had expected an attack from a single vessel. Then the Vorex woke up. Return fire came at Daniel from all directions. The Defiance shook as enemy weapons hit her shields. Alarms started screaming. Red warning lights flashed across every screen. Shields at 70%, the computer reported. Multiple impacts detected. "Keep firing," Daniel said through gritted teeth. His hands flew across the controls, steering the ship through the storm of weapons fire. Left, right, up, down, spinning and rolling to avoid the worst of it. A missile slipped through his defenses and struck the port side. The ship lurched hard. Metal screamed as part of the hull tore away. Hull breach in Section 4. Shields at 52%. Daniel did not slow down. He pushed deeper into the enemy formation, getting so close that the Vorex ships had to be careful not to hit each other. It was a dangerous game, but it was working. Every second he stayed alive was another second the fleet got closer to safety. On the tactical display, he saw something that made his heart jump. 12 Vorex ships were breaking away from the main fleet. They were going after the coalition. "No, you do not," Daniel muttered. He turned the Defiance hard and put himself directly in the path of the pursuit ships. His weapons found their targets. 2 more Vorex ships died in balls of fire. The others hesitated, suddenly more interested in destroying this crazy human than chasing the fleeing fleet. "That is right," Daniel said. "I am your enemy. Come and get me." They came. The Defiance was taking heavy damage now. Whole sections of the ship were dark, without power or atmosphere. Fires burned on 3 decks. The shields were failing, shields at 23%. Multiple hull breaches. Weapon systems operating at 40% capacity. 8 minutes had passed. 10 more to go. Daniel kept fighting. He fired every weapon he had left, scoring hits on enemy ships whenever he could. He was not trying to destroy the fleet. He knew that was impossible. He was just trying to stay alive long enough to matter. A Vorex cruiser managed to get behind him. Its weapons tore into the Defiance's rear engines. The ship shuddered and slowed. Engine 2 offline. Engine 3 at 30%. Speed reduced by 60%. That was bad. Without speed, he could not dodge. But dying faster was still not dying now. Daniel turned the crippled ship to face his attackers. If he could not run, he would fight head-on. The Defiance's remaining weapons blazed, and another enemy ship went down. 12 minutes. The Vorex commander must have realized what was happening. On the tactical display, Daniel saw the enemy fleet reorganizing. They were pulling back from the engagement, preparing to chase the coalition ships. They had figured out his plan. They were going to ignore him and go after the real targets. Daniel could not allow that. He pushed his dying ship forward, throwing himself between the Vorex and their prey. Every weapon fired. Every system was pushed beyond its limits. The Defiance was falling apart around him, but she was still fighting. "Computer, how much time until the fleet reaches the anomaly?" "Coalition ships will reach the anomaly in approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes. He just had to last 4 more minutes. The massive Vorex dreadnought moved forward. It was the biggest ship in the enemy fleet, armed with a weapon that could destroy cities. The dreadnought's main cannon began to glow as it charged. Daniel knew what that meant. One shot from that weapon would end everything. The Defiance had no shields left. Her hull was torn open in a dozen places. She could not survive a direct hit, but she could do one more thing. Computer, set collision course for the dreadnought. Maximum speed. Warning. That course will result in destruction of this vessel. I know. Do it. The Defiance surged forward one last time. Her remaining engines screamed with the effort. She was heading straight for the dreadnought, on a path that would take her right into the enemy's main cannon. The Vorex commander saw what was happening. He had a choice. Fire the cannon and destroy the Defiance, but also risk damaging his own ship. Or hold fire and try to move out of the way. He chose to fire. The cannon released its energy in a blinding beam of light. It hit the Defiance dead center, but Daniel had timed it perfectly. At the moment of impact, the Defiance was close enough that her exploding reactor added to the destruction. The combined blast was massive. It tore through the dreadnought's shields and ripped into its hull. The dreadnought did not die, but it was badly wounded. It would take hours to repair. Hours the Coalition did not have to worry about being chased. 17 minutes had passed since the battle began. On the Coalition flagship, General Kethrel watched the explosion on his screen. He saw the Defiance disappear in a ball of fire. He saw the dreadnought stumble and stop. The Coalition fleet emerged from the anomaly, battered and broken. Ships that had once been proud vessels were now scarred with damage. Engines flickered. Lights failed, but they were alive. On the bridge of the Endless Vigil, General Kethrel stood in silence. His 4 hands were clasped behind his back, and his ancient eyes stared at the empty space on the tactical display, the spot where the Defiance had been. "General," one of his officers said quietly. "Long-range sensors are picking up the aftermath of the battle. 14 Vorex ships destroyed. 23 more damaged beyond immediate repair. The enemy fleet is retreating." "One ship," Kethrel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir." The war room was quiet now. The same aliens who had laughed at human myths just hours ago were silent. Drethnix, the insect ambassador who had mocked human stories, sat motionless. His mandibles were still. His compound eyes stared at nothing. Amy Patterson stood at the observation window. She had not moved since the fleet entered the anomaly. Her face was dry now, but the pain in her eyes was clear. In her hands, she held the old photograph Daniel had given her. "How?" Drethnix finally asked. His voice was confused, lost. How could he do that? 1 ship against 47. It should have been impossible. By your logic, yes, it was impossible. Amy did not turn around when she spoke. "That is why he did it. I do not understand." Now she turned. Her eyes found the insect alien, and there was something hard in them. Something that had not been there before. "You asked about our myths earlier. You laughed at them. You called them the fantasies of primitives who did not understand the universe." Yes, I said that. Those myths are not just stories. They are not entertainment for simple minds. They are instructions. Amy walked toward the center of the room. Every human child grows up hearing about heroes, people who did impossible things, people who sacrificed everything for others. She held up the photograph. Daniel's grandfather survived one of the bloodiest battles in human history. He watched his friends die. He carried their bodies. And when he came home, he told stories to his grandson. Stories about Achilles, who chose a short life of glory over a long life of being forgotten. Stories about soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their comrades. "But those are just stories," Drethnix said weakly. "No. They are templates. They show us what we can become when everything seems lost. They show us that one person can make a difference. That sacrifice has meaning." General Kethrel stepped forward. His face was troubled, like a man who had discovered that everything he believed was wrong. "Commander Patterson, I have studied warfare for over a century. I have learned the tactics of 40 species. And in all that time, I never encountered anything like what your Commander Harris did today. Because no other species has stories like ours. What do you mean? Amy took a deep breath. Your people, the Valorians, are logical. You make decisions based on mathematics and probability. If the odds are against you, you retreat or surrender. It makes sense. Yes, it is the rational approach. Humans are not rational. At least, not always. We have something else. Something that tells us to stand and fight even when we should run. Something that makes us willing to die for strangers we have never met. She gestured toward the window, toward the stars. Out there, across the galaxy, there are species that think like you do. Species that calculate the odds and make logical choices. They have never defeated the Vorex because the Vorex are bigger, stronger, and more numerous. Logic says, you cannot beat them. And yet one human, in one small ship, hurt them more in 20 minutes than your fleets have in 10 years. Amy's voice was rising now. Not because he had better weapons, not because he had more ships, but because he believed. He believed in the stories. He believed that his death would matter. The room was completely silent. Every alien was listening, really listening. Perhaps for the first time. That is the power of myth, Amy continued. That is what you laughed at. The ability to look at impossible odds and say, I will fight anyway. The ability to choose death if death means something. The ability to become a story that will inspire others to do the same. Kethral bowed his head. I owe your species an apology, Commander Patterson. I called your beliefs primitive. I see now that I was the primitive one. I do not want an apology. I want you to learn from this. I want you to understand that the war against the Vorex cannot be won with ships and weapons alone. It has to be won with belief, with courage, with the willingness to sacrifice everything for something greater than yourself. And you believe other species can learn this? Daniel believed it. That is why he did what he did. Not just to save the fleet, but to show all of you what humans are capable of. To prove that our myths are not weaknesses. They are weapons. She walked back to the window and looked out at the stars. The Vorex have never lost a war. They have crushed every species they have encountered. They believe they are unbeatable because they have always beaten everyone through superior force. That is true, Kethral admitted. But they have never faced an enemy who does not care about force. An enemy who will die rather than surrender. An enemy whose soldiers become more dangerous when you push them into a corner. Amy turned around one last time. 1 year passed. The story of Daniel Harris spread across the galaxy like fire. It traveled from world to world, carried by traders and soldiers and ordinary people who heard it, and could not stop themselves from sharing it. The tale of one human who stood against an armada. One man who chose to die so others could live. At first, other species listened with doubt. Surely it was exaggeration. Surely no one was that brave. Surely the humans were making it bigger than it really was. But the evidence was there. The wreckage of 14 Vorex ships, destroyed by a single vessel. The damaged dreadnought that had taken months to repair. The coalition fleet that had escaped against all odds. It was real. And the galaxy began to change. Young warriors from a dozen species started asking questions. They wanted to know more about human stories. They wanted to understand how a culture could produce soldiers willing to sacrifice everything. They requested training alongside human forces. On the Valorian homeworld, General Kethral wrote a new chapter for their military academy. He called it The Lesson of Human Defiance. It taught young officers that mathematics was not everything, that courage and will could bend the rules of probability, that sometimes the most logical thing to do was something completely illogical. The Kelvari, Drethenix's insect people, began collecting human myths. They translated the stories of Achilles and Beowulf and King Arthur into their own language. Parents started telling these stories to their children at night. A species that had never understood sacrifice began to learn. Even the Thessari, the snake-like beings who had always been the most cynical of the coalition races, found something in Daniel's story that spoke to them. They had a word in their language, Kethval. That meant the final strike. It described a warrior's last act of defiance before death. They had always thought it was just a poetic idea. Now they understood it was real. Humans called it going down, fighting. The Vorex noticed the change. For the first time in their history, enemy soldiers were not surrendering. Coalition troops were fighting to the last being. Supply ships were ramming Vorex vessels instead of being captured. Prisoners were dying, rather than giving information. It made no sense to the Vorex commanders. Their entire strategy was based on the idea that all species eventually broke, that fear and overwhelming force would always win, that no enemy would choose death over defeat. But humans had taught the galaxy a different way. The war turned slowly at first, then faster. Coalition losses were still high, but Vorex losses were climbing too. More importantly, the coalition was no longer afraid. Fear had been the Vorex's greatest weapon, and now it was fading. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, a memorial was built on Earth. It stood in Geneva, outside the headquarters of the United Earth Council. A simple stone pillar with his name and a single sentence carved into it. He stood alone so others could stand together. Leaders from every coalition species came to the dedication. General Kethril was there. Older now. His blue skin faded with age. Drethnix represented the Kelvari, his compound eyes reflecting the sunlight. Even a Thessari delegation had made the journey, coiling their bodies respectfully before the memorial. But the most important person there was Amy Patterson. She was a full commander now, one of the most respected officers in the coalition fleet. The year had changed her. Her eyes were harder, her bearing more confident. She had led battles that would have made Daniel proud. She had become the kind of warrior the galaxy needed. The crowd fell silent as she approached the memorial. In her hands, she carried the old photograph. Daniel, as a boy, standing next to his grandfather. She had kept it with her every day since he gave it to her. 1 year ago, Amy began. We were running. The Vorex had found us. They outnumbered us. They outgunned us. By every measurement that mattered, we should have died that day. She looked out at the assembled crowd. Humans stood shoulder to shoulder with aliens of every shape and color. A year ago, that would have been unthinkable. But we did not die. Because one man refused to accept that the mathematics were all that mattered. One man chose to become a myth, rather than just another casualty. She turned to face the memorial. Daniel Harris believed in stories. He believed that the tales humans have told each other for thousands of years were not just entertainment. They were instructions. They were blueprints for how to live and how to die. Her voice grew stronger. He was right. In the year since his death, I have watched that belief spread across the galaxy. I have seen species that once thought sacrifice was foolish start to understand its power. I have seen warriors who once calculated odds start to fight regardless of the numbers. She held up the photograph for everyone to see. This was Daniel's grandfather. He fought in a war on Earth, long before we reached the stars. He survived terrible battles and watched friends die. And when he came home, he did not try to forget. He told stories. He passed on the lessons he had learned. Amy lowered the photograph. Daniel told me those stories before he flew out to face the Vorex. He told me about Achilles and Beowulf and Spartans at Thermopylae. He told me that humans do not just believe in heroes. We become them. Donna. She looked at Kethril, at Drethnix, at all the alien faces watching her. Today, I tell you the same thing Daniel told me. The myths are not just our history. They are our future. They are a promise that no matter how dark things get, someone will stand against the darkness. She stepped back from the memorial and raised her hand in salute. Commander Daniel Harris kept that promise. He became a story that will be told for generations. A story that has already changed the course of a war. The crowd was completely silent. But here is the truth he understood. The truth that the aliens finally learned. The story does not end with him. It cannot end. Because somewhere, right now, another person is hearing his tale. Another person is learning that sacrifice has meaning. Another person is deciding that they would rather die fighting than live surrendering. She lowered her hand. Daniel showed the galaxy what humans are made of. But more than that, he showed every species what they could become. He taught them that myths are not fantasies. They are weapons, and the most powerful weapon in the universe is a story worth dying for. Amy turned to face the stars. Somewhere out there, the war continued. But it was a different war now. A war where the enemy was finally starting to feel fear. Rest well, Daniel, she said softly. You did more than save a fleet. You changed the galaxy. And the story you started is still being written. She placed the photograph at the base of the memorial and walked away. Behind her, aliens and humans alike bowed their heads in respect. They came from different worlds, different cultures, different ways of thinking. But they all understood one thing now. Humans were not primitive. Their myths were not foolish. They were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because of their weapons or their ships, but because they had learned, long ago, that a good story can change everything. And Daniel Harris had given them the best story of all. The end. Today, the Vorex learned something new. They learned that there is a species in this galaxy that does not break. A species that turns defeat into defiance. A species whose fallen warriors become legends that inspire others to fight harder. She held up the photograph again. Daniel Harris is dead. But his story is just beginning. And when that story spreads across the galaxy, when every species hears what one human did against 47 ships, something will change. People who have spent their entire lives calculating odds and accepting defeat will start to ask themselves, what if I chose to fight instead? Drethnix made a sound that might have been wonder. You think his sacrifice will change the war? I know it will. Amy's voice was certain now, stronger than it had been all day. Because that is what myths do. They change everything. She looked at the photograph one more time. At the young Daniel standing next to his grandfather. Both of them smiling. Rest now, Daniel, she said softly. Your story is going to save more lives than you ever dreamed. The human, he said quietly. He did it. Around him, alien officers stared in disbelief. One ship against 47. One human against an empire. And he had won. Not by destroying the enemy, but by giving his friends time to escape. The coalition fleet entered the anomaly one by one. 16 of 19 ships made it through safely. 3 were lost in the unstable passage, but they had survived, because one man had refused to surrender. And somewhere in the debris field, where the Defiance had made her last stand, there was nothing left but memory, and a story that would never die. The Defiance was empty now. No crew, no voices, just the hum of machines and the blinking of lights. He walked to the bridge and sat in the captain's chair. Computer, begin startup sequence. Startup sequence initiated? The ship replied. Daniel looked at the screen in front of him. The enemy fleet was getting closer. 47 ships, coming to destroy everything he cared about. He was one man in one small ship, but he was a human. And humans had been doing impossible things since the beginning of time. Grew up hearing them, believing them, wanting to be like the heroes in them. And because now, I finally have the chance to become one of them. He started walking again. Tell them I was not afraid, he said over his shoulder. Even if it is a lie. And then, he was gone. Walking to his ship, walking to his death, walking into history. Behind him, Amy Patterson wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders. She had work to do. Ships to organize, people to save, and a story to remember. He turned to Amy. She saw something in his eyes that made her heart stop. "Daniel," she whispered. "No. I am suggesting," Daniel continued, his voice steady, "that one person can make a difference. One person, with the right story in their heart, can hold back an army." The aliens looked at him like he was crazy. Maybe he was. But Daniel Harris was a human, and humans had been doing crazy things since the beginning of time. The Vorex were coming. 47 ships against 19. The mathematics said they would all die. But Daniel Harris did not believe in mathematics. He believed in myths. And he was about to show these aliens why they should have never laughed at human stories.